Today's episode is a reminder of something I say frequently. Everything is connected. People, experiences, purpose, all influence each other and the direction of your life. You're about to hear a conversation that is part cautionary tale, part entrepreneur's manifesto on how to live fully and dream unceasingly, with a Podcasting 101 course tossed in. If you are thinking of making a change and charting your own course, this episode will inspire. If you are thinking of starting your own podcast, keep listening, because this episode is packed with practical tips and the encouragement you need to share your voice with the world. You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zaratny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a coach certified in time and stress management, helping clients make space for what matters most in their lives. Join me each episode and we'll talk about decluttering, stress management, habits, personalized productivity, gratitude, and so much more. I understand the overwhelm of life because I'm a wife, mom to kids and cats, and a former caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Today, I welcome Alesia Galati to the Positively Living Podcast. Alesia runs a full-service podcast management agency, meaning you record and her team does the rest. She helps business owners launch and maintain lead-generating podcasts. She lives in sunny North Carolina with her husband, 2 small boys, and a rescue pup. When she's not working, you can find her either hiking, chasing her kids around, or watching the latest Star Wars with her husband. Our conversation runs the gamut from practical to profound, which I thought might happen knowing Alesia as I do. She and I have been through many iterations of our businesses and have a similar sense of humor and quirkiness. She is truly authentic, and I wanted to find a way to work with her. If that concept sounds familiar, it's because you just heard about it on episode 31 on authenticity in life and business. Alesia and I were able to collaborate this year on my podcast. I knew I needed support to launch it the right way, and just as I was looking to do so, she launched her podcast management agency. It was universal timing at its best, and every tip she shares with you today is something I have tried successfully. She has many resources about podcasting you can view on her site, alesiagalati.com. That's ALESIAGALATI.com. Today she shares the most important elements of starting a podcast. You need to know your audience, what you want to say, and what kind of podcast you want before you begin. The additional part that might surprise you is that once you've decided these and have your concepts down, recording is not the next step. Marketing is. Be sure to listen to that part as she explains the necessary steps to launch to celebrations instead of crickets. If you're thinking of launching a podcast, her tips are going to be incredibly helpful, as is her encouragement that the market isn't really as saturated as you think. If you want to start one, we are both cheering you on. When you do it the right way, it will be a powerful medium to share your voice. I loved this conversation for so many reasons, but what stands out most is the discoveries we made about the impact of podcasting, the why behind what we do. The connections we make through podcasting are stronger than in writing. Writing and video have their place, of course, but there's a special combination that you are experiencing right now when you can hear the nuances in my voice and you're listening to what I share while you actively participate in your own life, walking, driving, running errands, relaxing, even showering. Yes, that's a thing. Most importantly, podcasting has been so popular because it bridges the gap between us. When we are isolated, which happened extensively in 2020, we crave connection and company. Podcasting answers that need. Now, let's chat with Alesia about pivoting and podcasting. Welcome, Alesia Galati, to the Positively Living Podcast. Alesia, you and I have known each other a couple years now in the online business space, and I always had a feeling that we would collaborate because I've always been impressed with your knowledge and probably most importantly because of our similar, shall we say, quirky approach to life. And it happened this year with the launch of my podcast. I had wanted to start one for years, but I needed help. And just as that happened, that I really wanted to start this podcast, you launched your podcast management company, and here we are. Welcome.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and be on the other side of, the editing and all that stuff and engage with your audience. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I wanted your knowledge, your wisdom, and your encouragement to be heard. So this is so meta and so awesome. But Alesia, would you please start with telling us a bit more about who you are, who you help, and what lights you up?
Yeah. So I am Alicia. Most people can't spell my name right. So I usually just go, whatever you want to call me is fine. But I grew up in a interesting situation, a very cult-like situation. And when I got out, I very quickly got a job and became a mom. And from there, I never was very satisfied with the idea of having to work a certain number of hours in order to make a certain amount of money. I never liked that. Like, I wanted to drive the ship of my life after being, quote unquote, held captive for so many years. I wanted to do my own thing and never really got around to it for about 7 years. I was in corporate. I worked in manufacturing, but I always had this pull towards the online space, which is where we know each other. And finally, tried different things. I tried inventory management. I said, wow, I hate this because I do this at my day job and I hate doing this. And then I tried some social media marketing. I really enjoyed that, but it was just kind of like I wanted to finish my bachelor's and life happened. And then I came around to podcasting and I launched my own podcast and I was like, oh, this is fun. This is the thing. Then this year, after getting laid off for the first time ever, which is like, if you've ever been laid off, you always remember the first time, I'm sure. Or you probably remember every time, but the first time just has this extra devastation to it, especially if you don't see it coming. And even though we were in the, beginning parts of COVID, I still didn't see it coming until my boss got laid off. And then I was like, "Oh no." And then I got called down like 30 minutes later and I was like, "I I'm terrified. What's going to happen?" So I drank that night as anyone would.
Naturally.
Yes. The next day I said, "I'm going to launch this podcast management business that I've been saying since January I'm going to do." And then posted about it, and it's been uphill since then, like uphill in a good way since then. It's been absolutely incredible, but I help usually no BS coaches, business owners, consultants, those kinds of people who are just like, "Let me give it to you straight. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm not going to give you the what are the top tips this week?" No, like they're just like, "No BS." I help them launch and maintain lead generating podcasts. Really focus on the launch strategy, making sure you are launching with raving fans, and then getting leads from there on.
And that's exactly what we did together. But backing up real quick, when you were describing the story, which of course I knew personally, but it's always interesting to like hear it again, kind of, wrapped up in this perspective of just sharing it with the listeners today. It makes me think about how much you probably craved normalcy and control and
Mhm.
swung very quickly into the traditional version of what we think of as, you get a job and you have a family and those kinds of things. And I can imagine that was an instinctive move on your part. And I think it is for all of us. And what I love about your story is that you kept thinking, something's not quite right about this. There's something more. And that's what I want everybody to walk away with today is, yeah, there's something more. And if you're thinking that, there really is, and there can be. And then thank you, COVID. Did
Yeah.
everybody hear the sarcasm? Did that come through enough? But in a way, yes. Okay. Another great example of when things are like seem horrible, but then they become the best thing. Cause I've watched you just like your whole business explode.
Yes. It's not to negate like terrible things, that have happened. with COVID at all. But for me, it was literally the best thing that could have happened to me in that time frame.
Yeah. And I think what it is that these horrible things that happen give us clarity.
Mm,
They really open up. It's like, you have some kind of explosion or some kind of destruction, and then the dust settles and you have a completely different perspective.
yeah.
And right, that lit a fire under you and you went for it. So let's talk about where you are with what you're doing and what it is that you see that podcasting does. I mean, even beyond lead generation, but I do know that that's important because I mean, I'm obviously doing that for my business, but I know for me, there's a special connection that I have with those who listen and something really special for me in sharing my voice and my perspective. And I love that you said the no BS. I would like to, I'd like to take claim on that one too. Telling it like it is and sharing your perspective. So what do you think?
Yeah. So as you're saying that, I'm just like, yes. So I call that the celebrity effect, with the connection that you have with your audience, because you are with them on their daily like walks, while they're cleaning dishes, while they're, walking the dog, they might be chasing the kids around, they might be showering. Like, I listen to podcasts in the shower and I'm very open about that, like, all the time. But really, it creates this celebrity effect of, I remember the first time that when I launched my first podcast, I was asking people like Emily Thompson of Being Boss to be on my podcast. And she said yes. And you should have seen the crazy dance that I did. Never met this lady in my life, but I knew her as like this celebrity in the online space because she had this like bomb podcast. And then I met her in real life and I couldn't even, I'm so embarrassed, but I couldn't even take a normal photo because I was so excited and my hand was shaking. I like I don't even have a good photo of us because I was just like, "Oh my."
It was like ultimate fangirl moment.
It's so sad, but yes. That's what you create with your audience when you are engaging with them in that day to day. And it's so much different than, say, a YouTube channel or a blog post, because that it's kind of like they have to focus and be like in the zone to just do that thing. Whereas I can still remember like podcast episodes that I've listened to on certain drives to work, or remembering, oh yeah, I was driving through that crazy rainstorm and I was listening to that podcast. There's connections to life situations that happen when you have a podcast. It's so magical.
Oh, that is a fun idea that I hadn't even considered. Well, I mean, I considered the idea that, yeah, we're together when you're taking a walk, or I do know that some do listen to me in the shower. It's totally a thing. Uh, but wherever you are, but this idea of what you're saying that you're connecting to a moment in life, you know what? That totally promotes a better memory
Hmm.
of the message.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of mine are like murder mystery podcasts. So those ones, they're quite terrible messages. But in the case of yours, yes, they would be fantastic messages.
Fair enough. But I guess the whole point is whatever it is that we want to, bring into our world in the moment. And so sometimes it is inspiration, but sometimes it's just flat out snort laughing or escaping into, non-reality or someone else's insane reality so you can avoid your own, whatever it is that it's that wonderful escape. And those moments of being able to connect it to your life. That's really interesting. Okay. So, one of the things I found myself saying, and I don't even know if I'm right about this, so I wanted to have it verified by you and really get into kind of like the details and even the stats about it, is podcasting is the new blogging.
Yes.
What do you think?
Oh, 100%. So I have a blog post that has the actual stats on there, but compared to like YouTubing and blogging, I always tell people blogging 10 years ago is what podcasting is today. And the fact that I believe it's 90% of podcasts pod fade, after 7 episodes. It's, like,
Whoa.
very few. So, if you get past that point, yes, there are so many podcasts out there, but most of them don't make it. And so if you can get past 7 episodes, even past a year, you're still doing a lot better than the majority of the podcasters out there. And I actually talked to a prospective client last week. She said that she has a friend who's in media who was like, everybody's podcasting, it's too saturated. And I was like, no, it's not. The thing is, it's not just like people only read one book or they only listen to one type of music or the one music artist. It's the same thing. Like the American person typically listens, this is pre-COVID stats,
Right.
but typically listens to 8 hours of podcasting a week. They're not listening to just one show. So to say that the market is saturated, that's not true. There are so many opportunities for your audience to listen to you that it doesn't even make sense to feel like it's saturated yet.
That's encouraging because I think along with the idea that this is new and popular is this impression that everybody's doing it. And then as soon as people get on a bandwagon, then suddenly you have the naysayers saying, well, it's too saturated. And
Yeah.
my impression with this concept of a saturated market in whatever space you're talking is it's only saturated if you're trying to do what everybody else is doing.
100%.
Right. And along those lines, so the what you call pod fade, is that the
Yeah.
technical term? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know that it's technical, but it's what
Well, you know
everybody
what?
calls
It's Alicia's. You heard it here on the Positively Living podcast.
it. Yes.
But it does, that sounds right to me. But yeah, this idea of a podcast that, you start strong. Listen, it happens to so many of us. I had blog fade hard,
Yeah.
which is the reason I went into podcasting, because I had a blog. Everybody said, "Oh, you have a blog."
Yep.
And it was like, whew, I'm blowing the dust off if that's what you're hearing. That's the sound you're hearing. It
Yes.
was dust on the blog because I just wouldn't keep up with it. And I think that can happen with people who start a podcast. But even with those numbers, the other thing is just what we talked about before. There's so many different kinds and different purposes behind the podcast as well. So maybe, one morning you want to listen to what we're talking about with anything from habits to stress to meal planning to whatever. And then you want to listen to a true crimes. I
Yeah.
mean, you're going to want to mix it up. It's like you said, you don't read all the same books. Now, sometimes I know for me, I'll get into this like just in time learning idea and I want to absolutely focus. But then again, this is a great example where multiple podcasts can benefit because I will start searching for keywords. I want to listen to every episode about Greg McKeown and his book Essentialism and his interviews, for example. I will hit up many podcasts that
Yeah.
have interviewed him.
Exactly.
Everyone has a different perspective. They're going to answer different questions. This will not be the first time, not be the last time that you hop on a podcast and talk about podcasting, but what we talk about today will be different and it will be a unique perspective that someone can get benefit out of.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also that people use it as a crutch, this idea that the market is saturated.
Hmm.
Because podcasting really is the one of the easiest ways to engage with your audience, especially for those of us who can't keep up with a blog, because I'm including myself in there too.
Hmm.
I cannot do it. I usually get like 4 out in a month, and then I'm like dry for like 3 months, and then I'm just like I can't. And then I'll be like, "Ooh, spurt of inspiration. Let's throw some blogs out." But podcasting, you're literally just sitting down, you're having a conversation, which you're already probably doing on a regular basis, maybe in the DMs or something like that, but you're just talking it out. And it's so better now, especially with COVID, because we crave this connection
Hmm.
with other people. And I'm going to a conference, like a virtual business conference next week, and it's 2 half days. I'm so excited, and I was mentioning it to my biz bestie, and she was like, "I can't do online conferences." And I was like, "For me, they are literally the only connection that I can get to other people in my industry and other people on the online space, because you should hear me trying to explain to my husband what in the world I do. He understands I do podcasting, but when I mention all the other nuances, the marketing, the connecting, oh, I got a new CRM, he's just like, what are you talking about?
How's your opt-in, huh?
Right? He's just like, it's kind of like the nod and smile, like how
Mhm.
I do when he talks about football. Same thing.
Right.
It's like,
Exactly.
okay.
That's nice, dear.
Yes, exactly.
Well, yeah, you see, that's another good point too. I mean, of course, we're seeing it this year when we are recording this and we have had the year of COVID. All of those effects, again, this is an example of when things get really crystal clear, how much we do crave the connection. And I know for me, the voice has always been important because you hear so much nuance in it.
Yeah.
You hear, I know that people can hear that I care when I speak,
Mm,
and it matters to me. And when you can hear that, especially in a time when you are truly lonely, when you are vulnerable. And I know that I remember in my time as a caregiver, that's a great example of being trapped essentially. Okay. I could not leave because I had an elderly mom with Alzheimer's and two little children. Dunkin' Donuts drive through saved me. I'm just going to put that out there. And I mean, really, it was, I could put them all in the car, but I had to be with them and things that I could listen to,
hmm
sometimes read, but as you said, reading takes a different kind of focus.
Yeah.
But something that I could listen to, I could put the earbuds in, it could be in my ears while I'm monitoring everyone and watching, and to be connected to someone where I feel like I'm not alone.
Yeah.
That is powerful.
And that's podcasting.
And that's podcasting.
It's so magical.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so now let's get into how do we do it? Someone's listening right now and they're like, Alesia, yeah, this sounds good. It sounds good. I'd like to, but oh my God, where do I start?
Yes. So there are a few things that I tell people that they need to do before they even consider launching a podcast. And that is know who you're going to talk to. Who is your audience? Who are the people that you want to connect with, that you want to tell your story to, or that you want to teach? What kind of podcast do you want to have? So is it going to be something that is entirely based on your business, or is it going to be a hobby podcast? Really define that ahead of time. And that's going to set the expectation for what kind of time you're going to put into it. Because, like for myself, I have a hobby podcast, and then I also am planning on launching a podcast about podcasting in Q2 of 2021. And the energy that I'm going to put into each of those, yes, I still put a lot of energy into the hobby one because there's a lot of research that goes into that. But the energy that's going into the business one, that's to bring me leads for my business. And so that's going to be a different mindset of energy. So really define what it is that who it is that you want to talk to, what it is that you want to say, and then what kind of energy are you going to need in order to produce that.
Hmm.
That way you set that expectation ahead of time because you don't want a pod fade. And in order to not do that, you got to know right away, okay, what is this going to actually require of me? A lot of people don't realize that the podcast editing, if you want to have like a nicely edited podcast, you're taking out all the ums, the ers, the false starts, all that fun stuff,
Mhm.
that it takes 4 times the length of the audio to do that. Typically, that is like minimum. But if you're like my first podcast, where I literally just went with it and I did minimal editing, I paused for 5 seconds when I lost my train of thought, and then I went in, cleaned it up wherever I needed to. But it was really just quick, sloppy, throw it in there, call it a day. If you plan on doing that, that's fine too. Just set that expectation ahead of time. And that's going to take you less time, obviously. But you got to know, okay, is that what I want? Do I want to just kind of throw it out? Like, is done better than perfect for me right now? Sometimes it is, and that's okay. The other thing that I always tell people is don't launch in 2 weeks. For the love of Tom and Jerry, Do not launch in 2 weeks. You'll see all of these programs out there. Launch your podcast in 14 days, launch your podcast in 28 days, launch your podcast in a month. You need time, especially if you don't want to pod fade, to get clear on exactly what it is you're doing to promote the living daylights out of it,
Mhm.
that you have people lined up ready to listen to your show and you're not stuck with just your mom and your sister listening. We don't want that. So promote it, talk about it. Don't try to like be quirky about it. Say I got something secret coming. No, just tell people that it's coming. That's going to get you people lined up.
Yeah, don't be afraid of that because I know it can be a big deal to put yourself out there, but put yourself out there with support. And I can promise you this works because Alesia and I did this very thing together and it's blowing up. It's in the best way possible. I
Yeah.
mean, it's amaze balls. I had to use that term. That's
Yeah.
technical term. Yeah, I had to use that. But so what I love about what you're describing to let's connect it to productivity because that's what I'm always doing, right? But it it's a habit that you're forming, okay? Because there is a commitment. There is a promise that you're making and there's an expectation on the listener side that you're going to share whatever. It doesn't matter what you're sharing or how you're sharing it, but that you are going to share. They're going to get used to it. They're going to expect a certain frequency, and you need to be very clear. So that's the other thing I'm thinking is that with the frequency, for example, if you're having a hobby podcast, maybe it doesn't need the same frequency as if you're doing it for a business, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's coming back to this idea of setting up this habit. So with habits, the smaller step, the better. You can always build on it. You can always decide you're going to grow into something different, expand on something, get help when you're ready to get help. If you can't do that yet, if you need to bootstrap it, it's all good, but being intentional about that. And I know for me and in my background that normally I will slap some things together easily and call it a day. There are a lot of places I will do that. But with the podcast for me, I wanted to elevate it a bit more. And that's why,
Mhm.
I chose to work with you and probably why I was waiting. And it's
Yeah.
okay to wait too, right? It, isn't it like, I mean, I'm going to ask you this as opposed to just assuming it, but is there a better time or not to launch? I mean,
I would say yesterday.
yeah, well, I kind of felt that way too. So,
Yeah, especially if you've had this on your mind for a while, do it. Like I'm working with a new launch client right now and she's had this idea for 7 years.
hmm,
And I had a call with her and her husband because her husband works with her in her business. And he was like, "Yeah, we made that intro like 7 years ago." Like thinking like, "Let's do this thing." And just thinking about what that could have done for her business at this point and 7 years in, like she'd be OG level podcaster, but that's okay. We're going to start now. We're going to launch with raving fans and it's going to be great either way. But she's going to have so much more to say because she's been holding it in for 7 years.
yeah. And I think that's an important point too, is that if you have been thinking about this for a while, if it has been on your heart, on your mind, you haven't quite taken the leap. I think it's even more important to get the proper help and to do it in the right way.
Yeah.
And yes, do it yesterday, but not launch in 2 weeks. So there's the balance, right? It's
Yeah.
like, given that, I think getting clear, that's really what you're describing here. And
Mhm.
then the next step after that, any practical or specific tips as to how to make the choices, the difference between, maybe bootstrapping it and things that you can look for with that, and then how to look for the right kind of podcast management.
Yeah. So there are a few ways to do that, but the first thing I would do is start looking at some like how-to guides and things like that. Like I have a podcast launch training on my website that has checklists and a mini training and it goes through kind of the things you need to think about,
Mhm.
but has that launch checklist. Okay, this is everything you're going to need in order to launch. And then once you've kind of laid out all the pieces, assess, okay, do I have the skill set and the tech savvy to hop on an editing program and figure it out? Or is this something I'm going to need help with? Editing is the number one thing that people usually outsource. So don't feel like it's crazy to do that. It's not. But a lot of people do it themselves. Like I'm in Facebook groups with thousands of podcasters, and the majority of them do it themselves. So it's not impossible to do. It just takes a bit of time to learn it, and that's fine. But you got to know ahead of time, is this the investment that I want to make? Or do I just want to hand it off to someone? The next thing you're going to want to do is get your equipment. So you've got your microphone, your headphones. You're going to pick what your editing software is going to be and what your podcast host is going to be. So a lot of people don't realize that your podcast host is different than your website. You cannot typically host your podcast on your website because of the bandwidth. It's a whole thing. I always recommend Buzzsprout. Always, all the time. It is the best podcast host for beginners, but also people like Pat Flynn use it, or people like Being Boss use it. So it's like OG podcasters who have been podcasting for what feels like forever also use it, but also my clients use it and they're beginners, and I use it for my clients and all the back end and back and forth and stuff. And the team behind them is fantastic. The customer service is fantastic. I've seen the back end of some of the other ones, and I am not impressed whatsoever. Not impressed. Like I just transferred a client and I was just like, yeah, no, we need to get you out of here.
We're leaving now.
Yes, exactly. Thankfully, she added that to her package. So I was just like, yes, thank goodness, because I don't want to work in the system. But like really deciding, okay, who is your podcast host? Who are you going to use to host your podcast? Really dive into who they are, what their values are, that kind of thing before you jump on board with one of them.
Mhm.
And then okay, you want to start marketing. And this is something that a lot of people don't think about. They think I'm going to start recording, I'm going to get all my stuff together, and then I'm going to launch, and then I'm going to start marketing. No, no, no. No, no. As soon as you have your concept and your artwork, that's it. Concept and artwork, then you start marketing. You start calling yourself a podcaster, launching soon, you tell everybody about it. Then you start crowdsourcing ideas from your audience on what they want to be on your podcast. Instead of keeping this all hush hush secret stuff, tell your audience, hey, I'm launching a podcast. What is something that you would love to hear from me? Which I know you did for
Mhm.
your podcast. You said, hey, audience, what do you want to learn from me? What would you expect me to talk about? That is going to be key in creating content that your audience wants to listen to. So often people think that podcasting is for the podcaster, but it's not. It's for the audience. You can't just podcast about whatever you want to podcast unless you have a lifestyle podcast and it's about living in New York City in your 20s. Okay, then sure. But if it's about your business, then you got to talk about your business. Yeah, you can throw anecdotes about your kids and your dogs and your life and things like that. But the very core is going to be about your business. So, really establishing, okay, what are the main 3 to 4 things that I am going to be talking about? And I like to call those your content buckets. So, everything, kind of think about like those at water parks and little splash pads. There's that big bucket
Mhm.
and it splashes down, but you got these 3 buckets underneath it. And that's how I always visually imagine this bucket, content buckets, right? This is me pouring into these buckets and then funneling through all of my bright ideas and my brilliant ideas and these great things that I have in my brain. But does it match, like in my case, podcasting? If not, okay, does it match marketing? If not, okay, does it match whatever else I might want to talk about? No, we're going to need to talk about that on maybe Instagram stories,
Mm.
somewhere else where it's not your core content. If it's not part of those 3 to 5 buckets, then you got to put it somewhere else. You can still talk about it. I'm not telling you can't talk about it, just somewhere else. So creating those core content buckets is going to be key. Then start recording, keep telling people about it, and then create your launch team. Your launch team is a group of family, friends, coworkers, colleagues, whoever you want, who will happily share about your show. They could be your not competition.
People, I mean, that are in your industry, presumably, is what you're saying, right?
Yes, they coincide with you. You have similar audiences. Complementary.
I was going to go with collaborators, but yeah, you should be collaborating with those who have complementary businesses. Absolutely. That's
Yes,
a good
those
tip.
who have complementary audiences to you, complementary businesses. So if you are a social media marketer, you would want to talk to maybe some graphic designers or maybe some those who are web designers and people are who are talking to the same people. So those are going to be on your launch team. Really create that, but like people who you know and like you, because
Mhm.
you want them to say nice things about you, right? That's the whole point. So launch with them about a week before your official launch. Let them know, hey, leave a review. Thank you so much. I love you. This is amazing. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any takeaways, any thoughts, any improvements, any of that stuff. Then you launch with your main team, your main audience on your launch day. But that day, you already have reviews. You've already got all of that, those, you've already started to get downloads because your friends and your family and your colleagues and all those people have already been in there on the trailer. And then you launch with a few episodes on launch day and you run from there.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, all of these things that you are describing, I can think of specific examples of what happened for me. And here's a great story that combines a bunch of them.
Yes.
Okay. I did the thing where it was like, yes, I'm doing a podcast, it's happening. And people surprised me that even paid attention to that, that knew about that, that wanted to support me. So that's one thing. You probably have a list of people right off the top of your head who are like, I know they would totally support me, right?
Yeah.
Your besties and things like that. But other people might surprise you, like, oh, that's exciting. And I want to listen to it and whatever. You're like, oh, okay. I posted asking the question, what would you like to hear on my podcast on Instagram? And I'm going to give him a shout out. Episode 6, Sorting Out Life with James Lott Jr. This is a great example of such a fangirl moment. I've been listening to him forever. I was honored to be on his podcast last year. And when I posted about this, when I said, what would you expect to hear on my podcast? What would you like to hear? And he said, me. And I was like, yes, I didn't even have to ask him. I was gearing up to ask him, would
Yeah.
he be on my show? And he pretty much volunteered just with that comment. You never know the kind of interaction, the kind of support that can happen
Yeah.
until you put yourself out there and you say what it is that you're going to do. And from the bucket standpoint that you're talking about filtering things,
Mm.
well, the positively productive motto is do less, live more, breathe easier. So we get to talk about a lot of different things on the podcast, but they need to belong in one of those or
Yeah.
possibly, multiple ones for it to fit, for it to make sense. Because I think as a podcaster, you can talk about the things that you enjoy and that you're passionate about, because that's the whole point. But you need to have your audience in mind, like you said.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. And you'll be able to see that with your stats. You'll be able to see what clicked with your audience. What, especially for solo episodes, what did they like? What did they not like? Which
Mhm.
ones got more? Maybe it was your title. Maybe you need to tweak that title, or maybe you need to revisit it and do a deeper dive. Maybe it was too high level. So there are a few things that you can do from like a looking back standpoint to see, all right, what is my audience like? What do they want to keep hearing? Things like that.
Okay, that's a lot of good tips. I think we're good. I don't think I missed anything. You've covered the bases. And I think just in general, right, it's about clarity.
Yeah.
It's about knowing why you're doing this in the first place, how you want to do it, what makes sense for you. And that kind of brings together your coaching and your help with setting up a podcast and how I coach people. And we talk about what's your personality like? What makes sense for you? Is this something that you can maintain? Is this a
Yeah.
habit that you can maintain? But there's no doubt about it that when you find the right combination, that podcasting is a brilliant way to market. So if it's something that you're thinking of doing, go for it. You have the help, you have the resources. All right. Are you ready for some fun, rapid wrap up here?
Yes.
Okay. Share with us, Alesia, the song that always makes me dance is?
Better When I'm Dancing by Megan Trainor.
Love
Every
that
time
song.
that comes on,
How
I'm
can
just
you not
like,
dance?
yeah, me and my kids, we just start dancing.
Yeah, that's going on the Positively Living podcast playlist, probably volume 2, because it's already growing so fast on Spotify. All right, how about the quote or mantra I share all the time is?
You get to choose. And this goes back to, I say this to my kids all the time, that whenever they want something and I have to take it away because they were not behaving. So we're very much like, you get to choose. If you don't want your Pokemon cards taken away, then you need to choose to do your schoolwork. It's that simple. Like, we're not making the decision. Your actions have consequences. And so it makes me think of this story of these two brothers who they both had a very alcoholic father, and one grew up, never touched liquor. The other one grew up and became an alcoholic. And when they were asked why, the sober one asked, don't you drink? He said, I watched my father. The other one, the one who grew up to be a drunk, he said, why do you drink? He said, I watched my father. You get to choose which one not that it's like good versus evil, but like you get to choose what happens in your life. And especially after growing up in a cult, it's like my mantra.
Absolutely. And I think that's such an uplifting life lesson right in there. And it applies to all of it, including podcasting that we've
Yeah.
been talking about today, right? You get to choose that choice and that intentionality that will take you where you want to go, but
Yeah.
you get to. Absolutely. That's beautiful. All right. How about a resource, book, or app that makes my life easier is?
So the Night Owl app. And this is a screen dimmer and night mode. And I'm the kind of person where if I look at my phone in the middle of the night. I wake up, I look at what time it is. Oh, I got some notifications, and I start scrolling. It happens.
Mhm.
And then oh, there's nothing. All right, roll over, go back to bed. But if even at the dimmest setting on my phone, it is still very bright.
Yeah.
So the night owl takes it a step even further. It turns on blue light automatically for you during certain times, but it also dims. Like, I never knew that phones could get that dim where you barely can see any light coming off of them. And so I have mine almost all the way up to the dimmer setting of like 100%.
Mhm.
Usually it's at about 80% while I'm sleeping. And that way, when I open it, it's not bright and it's not bothersome. And then if I do end up scrolling, I'm not, having that blue light issue or anything like that. And I can easily fall back asleep.
There you
It's
go.
magical.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion. I use on my devices, well, Apple has an automatic one, and on my laptop, I have it's a Flux F period Lux, and it's a similar idea. But I'm going to check out the Night Owl one because I think that has a lot of potential as well. Either way, this is a great suggestion from a productivity standpoint because you want to keep resting, but we do. We wake up, we use our phones for everything. There
Mhm.
are alarms, our assistants, and so having something that will help you with the color light, which,
Mhm.
has a huge impact on our brains and on our restfulness or restlessness, as the case may be,
Yeah.
that's important. Great suggestion. Okay. And last but not least, what or whom are you grateful for today, Alesia?
Today, I am grateful for my husband. I'm usually grateful for him because as I build my empire over here, my husband is a full time stay at home dad as well as homeschooler. And so he handles a lot of the house, a lot of the kids, and all that stuff. And I am just so grateful for him that I have him in my life, that he's such a fantastic father. And I could not be doing this without him because I just don't want to be a stay at home mom and build my business. I can't do it. So having him by my side is just wonderful.
That is wonderful. I'm grateful for him too, so that we could talk today. And I'm most certainly grateful for you. You know that. I tell you that all the time, but I'm now shouting it out to the audience as well for all that you do for me and also for coming here and chatting today. So let's talk a bit about where listeners can find you and what you have to offer them. I'm going to make a note. You already mentioned you have a blog post about getting started, and I know you have your training. So tell us.
Yeah, so if you go to alesiagalati.com, that has everything. The homepage has links to a workflow training as well as a launch training and access to all my blogs and things like that, but also a tools and resources area. So if you are looking at different tools for your podcast, or you want to know what some of my favorite tools are, that's where I keep all of my links, especially for Buzzsprout and things like that. But yeah, and my favorite place to hang out online other than my website is Instagram. I am all about my Instagram stories. Come say hi, say that you heard me here, and I'd love to connect with you.
Oh, yeah. We have a lot of fun on Instagram. Come hang out with both of us. It'll be great. Okay. This was amazing. Thank you so much, Alesia. Thank you for shining your light in this world and for sharing it with us today.
And thank you for having me.
It only takes one voice at the right pitch to start an avalanche. Diana Hardy. Thank you for joining me on the Positively Living podcast. Your time is precious, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. Would you like to further explore the topics you've heard and implement what inspires you? Could you use some coaching support? What if you could attend a private Q&A with my guests and access bonus content? You can do all that and more in the Positively Living membership community. Check the link in the show notes or head to positivelyproductive.com/membership to enroll. I look forward to having you join me next episode and in the community. Until then, keep it positive and keep making space for what matters most.